Hi, this is Born in Nova Scotia. I thought I'd show you the weather today. It's the 2nd of April, I think, and we're having a little bit of a storm. That's the LaHave Bakery, you can see over there. You can look them up on the internet. They have a brief little small web page. But I'm going to throw some sinks and some T-balls today, but it's a good bit of a blow, so I thought I'd show you what it looks like. There you go. Let's close that down and get going. There we go. You should be able to see. Alright, I think you can see me. There we go. I got a bunch of clay there. And wheels set up. Let's turn them on. Don't think I have some power there. Oh, I disconnected. Alrighty, that should be some power there. Right. Okay, if you've joined me before, my name is Vaughan Smith. I have a studio, and I have a studio gallery, and I have another showroom across the road. You can see those in the videos. And we're on the south shore of Nova Scotia, between Halifax and Yarmouth, which is the western side of Nova Scotia. And this is April 2nd, I think. It's hard to keep track of time when we're sort of locked down and there's nobody coming in. Like I said, I have a showroom, so normally we'd have customers every day, but we've been locked down for now 2 weeks and 2 days. So you're kind of losing track of time, like everybody. All right, let's just warm up first. So we'll do a couple of. This is 519 clay from Pottery Supply House, which is in Toronto. It's very smooth. It's a little softer than I like for my regular pieces, but I'm going to throw a sink, so basically it's a little easier to center it when it's a little softer. Notice I don't have my clay in little balls. With small things like this, you really don't have to bang it into a ball. But it's nice to throw a couple of small things, get warmed up, get a feel for the clay before you throw a big piece of the clay. This kind of tells you what condition it's in, basically. Feels good. Like I said, it's fairly soft. I do a fundraiser for my local firehouse, and I've made tea bowls for this year, so we're going to try and do a little tea and scones or cream tea type event. Of course, everything's on hold at the moment, and it may not happen this year. It depends on how things proceed. There we go. We're kind of behind everybody else as far as the number of cases of this COVID-19. We have 191 cases in the province of Nova Scotia. We only have a population of 900,000 people in the entire province. Most of those live in Halifax. I think there's like 500,000 people live in one city, and then the rest of the people are spread out over a pretty large area. That's what we liked about Nova Scotia. There you go. The foot on my T-balls is fairly small. And I kind of like to have a little belly. It always makes things feel like they're a little generous when you have a little convex kind of profile. Using this little metal rib to just give some definition to the edges. I'll trim these of course as well, so, and if you want, very carefully slow the wheel down. It's quite thin, but I can just give it a little extra surface interest by doing that. Sometimes I'll slip trail a creamy slip on these too, and that really looks nice. Alright, well, bad for the first warm-up. Alright, this is the beginning of a sort of throwing week, because the last week I've just been glazing. I posted some videos of glazing some big bowls last, and I really have spent about a week just glazing. I'm just going to throw a few things this week, I think, maybe because I made some pedestals in the last 2 days. I can show you how to do that too. If anybody needs easy made pedestals, I can do a quick video on doing that. I designed a nice simple way of making them, and making them very light, and they're good for outdoor use. Although these ones will never see the outdoors because they're going in my gallery, but anyway, one more and then I'll do the sink. Just moving the clay around on the wheel head. Press down, press up, and when you feel like you got that point where you don't feel any wobble at all, you let go really slowly. Put a nice little hole in. Leave about a ½ centimeter at the bottom. I always compress the bottom with my middle finger, moving from the wall to the center. And I've never had S-crack problems because my teacher, which his name was Gregory Allen, told me that's the best way to avoid S-cracks. If anybody knows Gregory Allen from England, last I heard he'd moved to France, tell him to contact me. I'd love to say thank you to him because he taught me how to do pottery. Speaking of teaching, the other person who had a major influence on my entire life was Anne McPake, who inspired me to change direction and not go to work for the local factory that was where I grew up, but actually go to art school and eventually become a teacher like her. And all those guys are in England, where I grew up in Yorkshire. Yeah, I remember that art room. It overlooked a pond behind the school, so you could actually do a lot of nice drawing and painting, and of course I chose to do pottery, but I've always painted and drawn on my pots anyway, so it's where I first learned how to do sgraffito. I made back in 1973 or 74 maybe. I made my first pots, and I made a little pear pot, which is basically a little mug basically, and I slit it down one side and folded the pieces over. It had a little belly, so it had like a pear shape, and my art teacher Anne McPake went over the moon for it, and I was just like, wow, am I that good? I thought it was terrible really, but she loved it, and she had the right decision about it, because I kept making pottery, and it's been an entire lifetime doing it now. So thank you, Anne McPake. Alright, so you see I've got two similar forms. Maybe I'll put a little groove at the bottom of that one, because when I did those lines I thought it would have been nice if there was a finish and a beginning to that area. And I used the wooden tool to do it, but there's no reason I can't just use this. And then it knocks it out of shape obviously, so then just use the tool to re-straighten it. And then I've shown these before, little tools for doing the edges, but this clay is very smooth, but this works. There's an angle to that rubber band, and you just put it over the edge like that, and it compresses the rim. Now this clay is very smooth, so I don't really need to use this for this clay. But if there was any grit in the clay, I would push it back down. Let's take this guy off. Alright, let's put this guy on here. Move this one out of the way for a minute. Now I'm going to do a sink. Oh, I don't want those. Now, this sink is a whole bag of clay. It's 22 pounds of clay, so it's 10 kilos here in Canada. Now, you want to make sure you don't trap any air when you put it down, so roll it around a little bit. And then bang it down. All right, do I feel strong enough for this? Now you can see it again. All right, are we ready? You kind of have to persuade these because there's so much clay here. Now I had a lot of back and shoulder issues over the last several years, but nothing in the last 12 months. And I've modified my chair so I'm leaning forward on my chair. In other words, the back legs are longer than the front legs. Let's get this just straight. And my shoulders are better because I've been doing physical therapy, strengthening them. I could probably show that to some people too in a video in the future, because I know a lot of potters' backs and shoulder issues are very common. Now, the first time I made sinks was in about the year 2000, 20 years ago. And I had 11 out of 12 cracked. It was Christmas. Just before Christmas, I was so excited because I threw a sink. So I threw another 11. I was really excited that I could actually center 20. They were 25-pound sinks as well, those, because I was in living in New York. Hello, New York. Take care of yourself, New York. And anyway, I made all these sinks, got them trimmed. I painted some of them, put a lot of time in, and then when I went back, a few were cracked, and the next few days a few more were cracked. I think I had about 3 or 4 that weren't cracked that I put in the kiln, and they came out cracked except for one. I had no idea what I was doing wrong, but over a period of months when I was remaking sinks, I spent more time pushing on the clay when I was centering it and doing this, pushing down and feeling for any sort of give in the clay, because I discovered that what I was doing during the centering process is having little flaps of clay that were just, because it was so wet, it would fold a little bit, my finger would dig in, and they would look like they were together, but they weren't. And so I just basically now spend more time just getting this piece of clay centered, making sure that I don't have any flaps and there's no feeling of sort of softness where there's like a pocket of moisture or water in the clay. And since then, I really haven't had any cracks except for very rarely. Now, I'm throwing with a sponge. I know some people hate that, but when I've got this big piece of clay that dries out, I always feel like it's better that you actually have enough moisture to continue the pull or push, whatever you're doing, without having to stop and get some water. So that's all the way down. I have to leave a very thick inside, about an inch, about 2 centimeters. I think I'm going to go a little further on that one. Because with the sink, yeah, it's still a little further, I think. You can stick a pin in there if you want to, just to kind of judge the thickness. Alright, that looks a bit better, so now I'm going to open it up. Put some water in there. I'm not sure where everybody's watching from, but our 3 clay suppliers here in Canada are all closed for this COVID-19 crisis. So it's going to be tough to buy supplies up here for a while. I just sold 10 boxes of clay to some people because I have a little bit of more clay than I think I'm going to need. Although who knows when we're going to open up again as far as the economy. And I planted a lot of seeds this week. I've got lettuce, spinach, and tomatoes now in seed trays at the other end of the studio. The lettuce and the spinach is already germinated, but the tomatoes haven't. And if you heard that, there was a big gust of wind outside. This building is right on the water. We have 32 stilts holding the building up. Yeah, you might read about me in the paper one day, because this building's been here 120 years. But I always look when we have a big storm coming. I always wonder if it's got my name on it. When I moved here, which is in 2010 and 11, we looked at North Carolina in New Bern, and that was beautiful. And I looked at some houses right on the water, and of course a couple of years back, I think it was, they had a big hurricane go through there, and I actually recognized the places. I thought, yep, I nearly bought a house there, and they were totally flooded. And I was worried when I was looking around there, and I asked the realtor about why the houses were all built up so high on, and he said, well, the streets flood occasionally whenever you get a storm surge. And I thought, no, I can't live here. So I came up to Nova Scotia and bought a studio and a house right on the water. I mean, literally, the water's underneath where I'm sitting right here, with the waves crashing amongst all those 32 Bigfoots. And I just did it because I thought, well, the building's been here 120 years, and I always trust the builders back then because they, use real huge thick beams that are in this building. I left some exposed, but a lot of them are covered up by the sheetrock and the insulation that we piled in here. But they're substantial, and it's been here through an average of one hurricane every 7 years, they say, in Nova Scotia. So it's had probably about 15 hurricanes go by the building. And touch wood, nothing so far. Global warming, of course, don't need to talk about that because I'm a convert. But so the building's probably not got more than 20 years left in it. The slope in a sink is really important because you want the water to drain out, and that's why I left about an inch at the bottom, because basically what I'm doing now is I put this tiny little, you can't really see from the video, but about 2 inches from the center, I put my finger down and press hard to make a little bowl within a bowl, and I pulled that out. So basically that's where the drain will go. And drains come in all sizes, so make sure if you do that, you leave a little hollow area that's wide enough, about that far across, so the drain can easily fit in there. And I'm just going to get the moisture off here. Alright, so it's got a horrible shape from what I can see up on the picture there. So what do? I have to open it up. So you got a nice curve at the bottom there, but the top is just not a good shape. Now I'm getting a little drag on my fingers, so I'm going to wet the sponge, drag it all the way around, because you do not want to have any part of the clay that sort of sticks to your finger when you do something like this. So the sponge is lubricated on the outside, now it's lubricated on the inside. I can open up that wall. I'm not going to thin the rim. I like the rim to stay fairly thick. If anybody's going to drop on anything on this sink, perfume bottle or whatever, you want to make sure your rim's fairly thick. Of course, nothing's perfect, so if you drop something at the right angle, it'll break any kind of sink anyway. I had one lady by my sink a long time ago. She saw me at a craft fair in the days when I used to do shows, and she said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to drop a hammer in my sink at home so I can have one of yours. And she did order later on, but I don't think she dropped the hammer in there. Who knows? Now this is what I call a splash rim. So I simply got a nice bowl, but I like to open it up a little bit, because this is what they term a vessel sink. So it just widens it a little bit. Got a good view? Yeah. Now this clay, as I said, 10 kilos, and that's about 18, 19 inches across, I would say. I could make it wider, lower it a bit more, but I think it's going to end up about 6 inches, maybe 6, 7 inches high, and when it's finished drying it'll be about 17 inches across, I would say. And that's still pretty large for a sink. A lot of the regular commercial sinks you wash in a bathroom are only 14 inches deep, so so this is fairly large for a sink. All right, that was easy. The clay was soft, and it was perfectly centered. Making sure the sponge was in my hand helped a huge amount because it kept it wet. On smaller pieces I don't do this, obviously, but I've had clay that's a little older. This is not so old. This is bought back in October, and it's only April now, so clay that gets stiffer is a lot harder to center. But and it wasn't wedged. It was a brand new bag of clay banged into a ball. I've always understood, and I've done it that way forever, because the clay's been pugged and stored in a bag. It's all completely consistent as far as its density, and I'm not a convert to wedging. I hate wedging. I have a pug mill that does my mixing, so as you can see, I cut my clay up into cubes practically, and just throw it directly from that, and it's always worked just fine. But anyway, let's see if I can get this off here. You can see that little hollow area in the inside. Ooh. If you have any questions, feel free to pass them in the comments, and I'll try and do a video at least a couple of times a week during this lockdown, and if you want me to throw something specific, just put it in the comments and I'll try and do it for you. I'm Vaughan Smith. This is Nova Scotia during a nice storm, and my cat's asleep over there, but she didn't come to join us, so next time maybe I'll put her in the video too. Alright, good night.